What's up, NFL fans? Welcome to another episode of Four Down Territory. I'm your host, Luke Easterling, joined as always by my good friend, Doug Farrar. Doug, another wild week of NFL action on the field, but we're going to start off the field with obviously a bigger issue that's impacting, society at large, but obviously the NFL impacted by COVID-19 this week. More than 150 positive tests among players and coaches last week alone. The NFL's response to that was to relax its standards by saying that fully vaccinated, asymptomatic individuals will no longer be subject to that weekly testing. There's obviously contingencies for position groups and team outbreaks and that sort of thing. But, is this a case of the league relaxing its standards in order to keep the season going instead of really reflecting the public health concerns here? And how do you think this ends for the NFL?
Well, Luke, as you know, the NFL believes in profits over livelihoods and profits over individuals. It's been that way forever. It was that way when the league hid the long-term effects of head trauma for decades and hired rheumatologists and educated in Guadalajara to try and, go over the whole thing. There's always been a rub some dirt on it mentality when it comes to the well-being of the players. This should come as no surprise. And the whole idea of betting on the Omicron strain of the virus to be more transmittable but less serious in symptoms just as it starts, that's right in line with the NFL's brand, but we have no idea of the severity of the strain. We have no idea what long COVID issues could happen from this strain. We really know nothing about this virus yet in the long-term transmission. So to relax the standards at the same time this thing is spreading across the nation and, major cities are having their highest transmission rates in months. I think it's unwise. I think, sadly, it's also completely on brand.
Yeah.
How it ends? Likely many more COVID cases in the NFL and possible cancellation of the remainder of the season, whether it's the regular season or the postseason, when teams aren't able to field full rosters. I don't know how else this goes.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head early on. We know that the NFL is always going to protect the shield above all else, right? This situation is no different. The protocol changes are all about making sure the schedule isn't interrupted, right? It was in response to the fact that we've had all these games moved to Monday and Tuesday and, teams with 20 or 30 guys on the COVID list. They're basically saying we want to create policies to where we don't find out if these guys are positive, if they're asymptomatic, which seems kind of backwards to me. I know how this ends for the NFL because it'll end with them always doing what they can to protect their own interests, right? No matter how that's how they've done at every step. That's how they've responded to this situation, putting the shield over necessarily their responsibility to the public health at large. And I think, honestly, at this point, I just hope it doesn't have catastrophic consequences, not just for the league, but for everyone who comes to the games, who everyone who's involved here.
Yeah, we have to just cross our fingers on that one.
Now, moving on, at last week's owners' meetings, Doug, the owners approved a one-year rule in which teams that lose their head coaches in season would be allowed to seek permission to interview potential replacements 2 weeks earlier than other teams. Certainly turned things in the favor of Urban Meyer's firing, as Jaguars owner Shad Khan fired Meyer after he flew home from the owners' meetings. Now the Raiders and the Jaguars are the only teams that are favored under this new rule. We know that the Bears need to get in on this right now, obviously, with Matt Nagy. But which other team should take advantage of this as soon as possible and move in a different direction with their head coach in season?
Yeah, the Bears, a charter franchise since 1920, have never fired a coach in season, as we've talked about before.
Now's the time.
Now's the time. I would say, and I wrote about this week, I think it's the Panthers. I will say that Matt Rhule should send Urban Meyer a nice fruit basket or something, because were it not for Myers, maybe the worst single season a head coach has ever had in the NFL, we'd be talking a lot more about Matt Rhule messing things up. I know you're going to bring up Joe Judge, and I completely agree. Well, both Rhule and Joe Judge have 10-20 records since they were hired in 2020. And very much like Judge, Rhule has cast blame for his start in the NFL at everyone but himself. Like Judge, he's fired his offensive coordinator, made him the fall guy. No discernible improvement after that offensive coordinator was fired. If anything, Carolina's offense has gotten worse with this whole two-quarterback thing with Cam Newton and P.J. Walker. Right. Like that's ever worked in NFL history. Ask Tom Landry about that. I think Rhule is a brilliant college coach. I don't think he's done anything to indicate that he isn't over his head. I think David Tepper, the owner, was a smart guy. I think he hired RHULE with the best intentions. And I think if Tepper wants to continue to be a smart guy for the betterment of his franchise, he's got to pull out now and get on the, guys like Byron Leftwich, who I know you know well, is the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. He's getting looks from teams already. So they've got to get on this. If they want to move on from Matt RHULE, and I think they should, they have to get on it. And I know you have a similarly dysfunctional situation that needs to come to an end.
Yeah, it's the Giants. And you mentioned Joe Judge earlier, but I mean, really both of these guys, what can you point to and say, this is moving in the right direction? We're struggling, we've got some young players, but things there are things to hang our hat on moving forward, and we can see the forward motion, right? I don't see it with either of these teams. And again, particularly when you have, and this is what we discussed a couple weeks ago, right, is that RHULE and Judge kind of seem to have this authoritarian mentality where with RHULE it was the running game, right? We got to run the ball this many times. Joe Brady didn't want to do it, so he makes him the fall guy, fires him during the bye week for the offensive struggles, and things still aren't getting better. And I think Judge has a very similar style, which we talked about, and that's the kind of stuff, both that authoritarian style and also what you mentioned just now about deflecting blame over and over and over again and pointing to execution, or this coach didn't do that, and we get in everything but taking responsibility as a head coach. That's how you lose a locker room very quickly. Losing obviously contributes to that, but when you're losing and you're coaching in a way that's just not fun for players, it doesn't create an environment where they're enjoying themselves. And then when things go wrong, you're pointing the finger at everyone else. That's how you lose a locker room, and I think that's happened in both these situations.
It's just no way to lead, and even if it isn't your fault as a leader in any capacity, it's your job to fall on that sword. And
right, it comes with the gig, right?
You don't make it about everyone else. Yeah. So I agree completely.
Now moving to the AFC playoff race, which has been really entertaining so far, right? The Colts beat the Patriots Saturday night. That meant that no AFC team could clinch a playoff berth or a division title in Week 15. So in a conference where it seems like nobody wants to dominate from week to week, which team in the AFC do you believe in the most at this point? I feel like we've asked this question almost every week because it always changes, right?
Well, and we'll ask the same question next week, and it'll be someone else. Right now, it's the Kansas City Chiefs for reasons you would not expect. It's their defense. I have no question whatsoever about the talent of Kansas City's offense, but I don't know from down to down what I'm going to get. There is still far too much randomness in Patrick Mahomes' game. He's, gotten settled a little bit, but until and unless that really changes in a more consistent way, I'm going with the defense that has been absolutely lights out the second half of the season especially. They lost Chris Jones to COVID against the Chargers, and they still made enough plays to pull that out in overtime. This time of year, I think you make your bones on defense, and that has been with the Chiefs in the AFC. And by the way, the Cowboys in the NFC. That's another team that the offense is struggling. The defense is absolutely lights out. So in the AFC, I'm going with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Chiefs too, but it's going to be because of that offense. I think they're finally finding their stride, right? We talked about this earlier in the season where they've figured out how to work around the way teams were defending them. And I still think Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, that's still basically the holy trinity of dynamic offensive playmaking in the NFL. I think they're as difficult to defend as any trio in the league. And they've also got that more balanced attack now. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is healthy. He's balancing out that offense with an effective running game. The offensive line is coming together. Again, a lot of new moving pieces in that offensive line this year, right? They're starting to gel. They're starting to come together. Creed Humphrey, who should have been drafted way earlier than he was, is having a phenomenal season as a rookie. This defense's turnaround has obviously been huge for their success in recent weeks, but I still think, again, that Chargers game, what did it come down to? It came down to their big-name playmakers on offense making plays in key moments to win that game. And I think when you have a rare playmaker at quarterback and you have those really uncoverable guys in Kelce and Hill, and you have a balanced attack where teams now just can't sit back and send the pass rush and drop everybody back, you've got to put guys in the box to respect that run game. I think that complete complementary football on both offense and defense is why the Chiefs are the team to beat now in the AFC.
Yeah, run enough to make him drop that second safety. And I think the entire Chargers secondary is still trying to recover from that little whip route that Tyreek Hill ran, that's uncoverable. That's just
somebody's head is still spinning. They can't make it stop. It's terrible.
Illegal.
Now to close out this week, again, we mentioned Urban Meyer's situation earlier. He is out of the NFL. likely never to return again if the league knows what's good for them. Matt RHULE is making a joke of his time with the Panthers. We've talked about how difficult it is for an established college coaches at the highest level in that situation to make their way in the NFL. You can be as good as you possibly can be at that level, but coming to the NFL is just a whole different beast. If you were a team owner right now and you had to hire a coach only from the college ranks, who would you pick and why?
I would go with, I'm going to pick the guy who replaced Matt RHULE at Baylor, is Dave Aranda. And when you talk to people who know him, he is humble. He is always learning. He's always like, okay, what are we doing wrong and how do we get it right? It is never about blame. It is about learning. It is about getting better. He does not put attention on himself. He does not try to make himself look right. And furthermore, when you talk to people who know college football a lot better than I do, because I'm an NFL guy, they'll tell you how Aranda is one of the 2 or 3 best in the NCAA at defending whatever insane sort of spread or multiple, stuff comes out of college offenses. And as you well know, Luke, everything that works in college offenses will make its way to the NFL. I think Aranda has the temperament and the overall personal, emotional intelligence to succeed in the NFL. Would he ever want to? I don't know if he does, but I think he would be great. The other guy I'd mention is Wisconsin defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard, former, obviously, NFL safety. Packers tried to hire him before the 2021 season. They won't be the last.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Matt Campbell from Iowa State for similar reasons, basically. I think everything you just said about Dave Aranda, I think, applies to Matt Campbell and what he's done at Iowa State. There will obviously be bigger names, and you can have your Dabo Swinneys and your Lincoln Rileys and all that. I want the right leader, like you said, with the right temperament.
Yeah, let's take a guy who said, I'm going to quit if my players ever get paid, and put him in the NFL.
Still waiting for that, by the way. Still waiting for that for him to make good on that promise. But that's the thing. I mean, if you go and ask anybody who's played for Campbell, how he'd fare as an NFL coach, you're going to get genuine, unanimous support instead of basically being asked, is this on the record? Do I have to be honest? You're going to put my name on this, right? And every offseason, the last 2 or 3 years, he's gotten interest, and he's one of those names that comes up, and it usually results in a contract extension to keep him in Ames, and with good reason. But I think if he ever gets to the point where he wants to make that jump, there will be no shortage of NFL teams willing to give him that chance. And I think it's because of that temperament, that leadership ability, the ability to delegate to others, to get the most out of your talent. And I think Campbell would check all of those boxes and be, if anybody's got a chance to have a different outcome than somebody like an Urban Meyer, it's a guy with a style like Campbell and Aranda as well. Yeah,
and Leonard. Don't hire the big names, hire the right guys.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for us this week. Thanks so much for watching. For Doug Farrar, I'm Luke Easterling. We'll see you next week.